Good afternoon. Welcome to the webinar. We're delighted to have all of you with us today for this event. On this webinar, we will be covering what's new in WCAG 2.2 AA. And I'm now going to go ahead and hand the webinar over to our first speaker, Michele Zucchini.
Thank you, Bethany, and welcome everyone. As Bethany introduced, today we'll focus on what's new in the Web Content Accessibility Guideline in its version 2.2 AA. Before we go deep into the core of this session, let me do some introduction around us. So UsableNet has more than 2 decades of experience in digital accessibility, and we started very early producing technology as a plugin for Macromedia Dreamweaver back in the 1999-2000. And obviously, we have evolved since then, and we are now providing our clients with technologies and solutions for their digital program on web accessibility. At the moment, we have more than 1,000 engagements globally all around the world with offices in New York, Austin, and Italy. We support our clients throughout all the possible industry, retail, travel and hospitality, technology, education, financial services, and healthcare. We have several partnerships with leading disabled community organizations, such as the American Foundation for the Blind, AccessWorks, and the Helen Keller Service for Blind. And we are also recognized as an industry leader in diversity and inclusion and web accessibility. Just a couple of words around myself, Michele, and the other speaker in this webinar, which is Giacomo. I am the Vice President of Delivery and Accessibility Operations. I have more than 20 years of experience in software development, accessibility, and team management operation. And my role within the organization is to keep the hands of our clients and guide them through the implementation of a accessibility program that will make accessibility a sustainable requirement within the organization. And like I said, in order to provide you with visibility on what's new in the WCAG 2.2, I'll have Giacomo helping out today. Giacomo is the director of our accessibility auditors. He has over a decade of experience in web development and accessibility, and his main role in UsableNet is to oversee the auditors team's activity and providing technical support to our customers. In terms of the agenda for today, I will just walk you through a very brief introduction on what the new guideline incorporates, and then Giacomo will do a deeper dive on the specific requirements and the intent of the goal of every new success criterion that has been introduced. Also emphasizing who will benefit from this new criterion and providing few examples so it will be easier to understand and also to start determining how your digital properties will be potentially impacted by the new success criteria. All right, before we start on the specific and the details, just to make sure we are all aligned, let me spend a couple of seconds on what is the Web Content Accessibility Guideline. It is a documentation, it is a guideline, and this should not surprise anybody as it is part of the name, that outlines the principles for enhancing the accessibility of web content and focuses on individuals with disabilities. What is particularly interesting around the Web Content Accessibility Guideline is that it doesn't provide specific instructions on how to do things, but actually provides guidance on what needs to be done in order to guarantee that a digital property, a web property, is accessible to users with different abilities. There is a broad spectrum of impairments that is treated within the Web Content Accessibility Guideline, and we go from the visual, auditory, and physical disability to the speech, cognitive, language learning, neurological disabilities. And while there isn't any specific indication that correlates one success criterion to one and only one disability, this also emphasizes the fact that the Web Content Accessibility Guideline also covers combination of disabilities, which actually are very popular in users with impairments. In order to validate a success criterion of the Web Content Accessibility Guideline, which is the typical work that Giacomo and his team are performing when it comes to doing an audit, an accessibility audit of our clients' websites, we start from the declaration of the goal. Every success criterion has a specific goal. For example, the success criterion 111 refers to the non-text content. And you can find in the guideline the list of tests that needs to be performed in order to validate the success criterion and mark it as passed or failed. Some of the tests could be run automatically. For example, in the 111 criterion, as we want to test whether an image has a meaningful alternative text. The presence of an alternative text through the alt attribute is something that we can determine automatically. But in order to determine the meaningfulness and how appropriate is the alternative text, that typically is something that requires a human interaction. So a human being performing a manual verification, assessing the context of the image, the role that the image plays within the page, and then determining whether the criterion has passed or not. Let's now see a high-level view of what's new in the 2.2. So the 2.2 introduces a range of new success criteria that are supposed to expand what was already part of the 2.1, with particular focus on low vision user, cognitive impairments, and restricted fine motor abilities. So it is an enhancement of the previous guideline with particular attention of these categories of impairments. And it does that adding a number of success criteria that obviously maintaining everything from the 2.1. In terms of the success criteria, there are 6 new, which is focused on obscured, and Giacomo will walk you through the details for each of them. Drug movements, target size, consistent help, redundant entry, and accessible authentication. What also is an important news is the fact that with the Web Content Accessibility Guideline 2.2, one success criterion has been removed. This is something that never happened in the past, meaning that every time the W3C provided a new standard for accessibility, maintain all the previous success criteria. In this case, the 411, which is related to the parsing errors, has been removed and marked as obsolete. This is particularly interesting because the 411 was, I think, the only success criterion of the guideline that was covered completely with an automated test. Also, the legal industry was often reporting issues around parsing. For the ones that are not technical, parsing is related to the correctness, formal correctness of the code of the page. The Criterion was speaking about the fact that whether the page, so the code of the page contains mistakes, formal syntactical mistakes, those might be source of an accessibility issue. That's why it's a violation of the Web Content Accessibility Guide. The reality is that with the modern technology, parsing errors are normally corrected by the browsers and very, very, very rarely are source of an accessibility issue. In particular, in case a parsing error drives an accessibility issue, there will be other success criteria of the guideline that can cover the specific accessibility problem triggered by the parsing error. For this reason, this criterion has been removed. So with that said, I would leave this stage to Giacomo that will walk you through the specific details for every success criterion.
Thank you, Mick. All right, so let's delve into the core of the training with the 6 new success criteria. The first new criterion is the 2.4.11 focus not obscured minimum, which is a AA requirement. Let's review the requirement together. When a user interface component receives keyboard focus, the component is not entirely hidden due to author-created content. The goal of this success criterion is to guarantee that element currently in keyboard focus remains at least partially visible within the user's viewport. For sighted users who rely on keyboard navigation, being able to identify the element in focus is essential for seamless interaction. When the focused element is not visible, users may experience confusion or perceive the system as unresponsive. Given the prevalence of intricate responsive design nowadays, this AA criterion permits the focused component to be partially obscured by other content created by the author. However, it is important to note that while a partially obscured element may still be visible, excessive obstruction can hinder the user experience. Consequently, designers and developers should strive to ensure that the entire focus component and also its associated focus indicator are fully visible, as mandated by the corresponding AAA requirement, which is focus not obscured enhanced. Who benefits from the application of this success criterion? Sighted users who navigate web pages using a keyboard interface can identify the component that gains keyboard focus. This includes individuals who use keyboards or devices with keyboard interfaces, such as, for example, those employing speech input, SIP and PAF software, on-screen keyboards, scanning software, and various other assistive technologies. Individuals with limited or low vision who mainly rely on a pointer for screen orientation and positioning, they find it valuable to have a visible indication of the current keyboard interaction point. And this becomes especially crucial when magnification reduces the overall visible screen area. And finally, individuals with attention deficits, short-term memory challenges, or limitation in executive function also gain advantages from being able to identify the location of keyboard focus. Typical examples of failures include sticky footers, sticky headers, and non-modal dialogues that cover sections of the page. To better grasp this criterion, I'm going to present a video demonstrating a keyboard user navigating through the content by tabbing. As the user navigates forward, each focused element is visually presented, indicating that the criterion appears to be met. However, when navigating backward using Shift-Tab, after a few shifts, There are no visible changes on the screen, and the focused element is not presented visually to the user. Specifically, items related to the meetings and events section, such as calendar, forums, and roundtables, become obscured by the sticky header. This, of course, signifies an accessibility violation of the 2411 success criterion. In this other example, we'll notice that the focused item stays visible despite the presence of sticky elements. Whether the user navigates forward or backward, the scroll padding, which is a CSS technique, ensures that the focused element and its associated focus indicator remain visible even when the sticky header is present. As the user moves forward, each focused element is visually displayed on screen and available for the user. When navigating backward, the page automatically scrolls to ensure that the focused element remains visible on the screen and is not obscured by the sticky header. Okay, the next success criterion is the 2.5.7 dragging movements classified as a AA requirement. Let's examine the normative section of the success criterion. All functionality that uses a dragging movement for operation can be achieved by a single pointer without dragging, unless dragging is essential or the functionality is determined by the user agent and not modified by the author. The aim of this success criterion is to ensure that functionality relying on drag me movements also provides an alternative single pointer mode of operation. This eliminates the necessity for precise dexterity usually required when dragging elements. Indeed, this criterion aims to offer an accessible alternative for individuals who find it challenging to perform precise dragging movements. When an interface integrates functionality that depends on dragging movements, users perform 4 distinct actions. The first one is tap or click to establish an initial point. Then press and hold that point. Next, reposition the pointer. And finally, release the pointer at the final point. However, not all users can effectively maintain pressure on the initial point while simultaneously repositioning the pointer. Hence, an alternative method must be accessible for users with mobility impairments who rely on a pointer device to utilize the functionality. Who gains advantages from the implementation of this success criterion? Individuals encountering difficulties in performing precise dragging motions. Users utilizing specialized or adapted input devices such as trackballs, head pointers, eye gaze systems, or speech-controlled mouse emulators. Common examples include maps and linear slider widgets, like those utilized, for example, for adjusting the audio volume level. In the upcoming video, we will review a user's attempt to interact with a dual thumb price range slider. Clicking on the track doesn't trigger any action, and the slider can only be interacted with by manually dragging and dropping the thumbs. Of course, this results in the failure of the 257 success criterion. In this second video, we'll examine another example of a dual thumb range slider this time employed for filtering by time rather than price, we'll observe that while it's not optimal, it still does satisfy the success criterion. Clicking on the track prompts the nearest thumb to adjust its position accordingly, leading to a pass of the success criterion. However, interacting with the track at a middle position can be unpredictable, since it's unclear which thumb is closest, necessitating users to move the thumb incrementally to achieve the desired effect. In the next example, we'll explore another viable solution. Here again, we have another video showcasing a dual thumb price range slider. In addition to integrating one-click functionality on the track, the author has also incorporated two number input fields, enabling users to directly input the desired minimum and maximum values. Of course, this guarantees a predictable behavior. Let's proceed to the next success criterion, 258, target size minimum, classified as AA requirement. This success criterion reads, the size of the target for pointer inputs is at least 24 by 24 CSS pixels, except where spacing undersized targets, those less than 24 by 24 CSS pixels, are positioned so that if a 24 CSS pixel diameter circle is centered on the bounding box of each, the circles do not intersect another target or the circle for another undersized target. Equivalent, the function can be achieved through a different control on the same page that meets this criterion. Inline, the target is in a sentence or its size is otherwise constrained by the line height of non-target text. User agent control. The size of the target is determined by the user agent and is not modified by the author. Essential. A particular presentation of the target is essential or is legally required for the information being conveyed. In this instance, the goal is straightforward to grasp. The aim of this success criterion is to ensure that targets can be easily activated without accidentally triggering nearby targets. Who benefits from implementing this success criterion? Individuals with dexterity limitations or fine motor difficulties, users who primarily navigate using touch screens on mobile devices, people with mobility impairments such as hand tremors, for example, who rely on mouse stylus or touch inputs. But it's not just users with disabilities who benefit from the application of this success criterion. Consider users in environments where external factors like vibrations on public transportation might impact interaction, or simply individuals with larger fingers. Here we have a screenshot featuring 3 examples of icon-based buttons extracted from the WCAG understanding document. The first scenario displays 6 horizontally aligned icon-based buttons, each with a target area of 20 by 20 pixels and no spacing between them, which represents an accessibility violation. In the second case, we again have 6 horizontally aligned icon-based buttons, but with an increased target size of 24 by 24 pixels, which ensure compliance. The third and final example of this slide features another set of 6 horizontally aligned icon-based buttons. While each button maintains a target area of 20 by 20 pixels, which is below 24 by 24 pixels and may appear a failure, there is now a 4 pixels margin between them, forming a series of non-intersecting 24 CSS pixels diameter circles. Consequently, this configuration meets accessibility standards. In this other screenshot, we observe a customized dropdown containing a list of selectable options. In the first instance, each option has a height of 18 pixels. Consequently, drawing circles with a diameter of 24 CSS pixels at the center of each option causes them to intersect with the preceding and succeeding options, resulting, of course, in a failure. In the second scenario, the dropdown remains unchanged, but the author has added extra padding for each option, increasing the height to 24 pixels. This adjustment ensures that the minimum target size requirement is met, therefore fulfilling the success criterion. The next success criterion is 326 consistent help, categorized as a single A requirement. Its normative content states, if a web page contains any of the following help mechanisms, and those mechanisms are repeated on multiple web pages within a set of web pages, they occur in the same order relative to other page content, unless a change is initiated by the user. Human contact details, human contact mechanism, self-help option, a fully automated contact mechanism. This success criterion aims to guarantee that users can readily access assistance for completing tasks on a website, provided, of course, it is available. Consistency in placement of the help feature across multiple pages enables users to recognize and access it more easily and quickly when seeking assistance. Who gains advantages from the implementation of this success criterion? Individuals encountering challenges in locating assistance are more likely to find the help mechanisms and complete their tasks successfully if it is consistently placed in the same position for multiple pages. Individuals dealing with cognitive fatigue or shutdown can conserve their mental energy for the task rather than using it to search for support. In this example, spanning the subsequent two slides, we observe a pretty much standard e-commerce website with a header, a navigation, a primary homepage content, and a footer. On the homepage displayed here, the help link is located at the top within the header. On the second slide, we transition to the product listing page, showcasing filters and a list of available products. The help link here is situated within a sticky element at the extreme right center of the page and remains visible as the user scrolls the page. On the third slide, the help mechanisms once again resides within the header at the top of the page. Consequently, throughout this set of web pages, the inconsistent placement of the help link, of course, results in an accessibility violation. The penultimate success criterion for today is the 337 redundant entry, classified as a single A level requirement. The normative portion of the criterion says, information previously entered by or provided to the user that is required to be entered again in the same process is either auto-populated or available for the user to select, except when re-entering the information is essential, the information is required to ensure the security of the content, or previously entered information is no longer valid. This success criterion aims to ensure users can efficiently complete multi-step processes with minimal cognitive effort. Its goal is to reduce the necessity for users to input the same information repeatedly and facilitate the retention of details from previous steps. Retrieving information for input can pose significant challenges, particularly for users with cognitive or memory impairments. Additionally, All users may encounter mental fatigue as they progress through the steps in a process, which is compounded by the stress of recalling information from short-term memory. Those with learning and cognitive disabilities are especially vulnerable to this mental fatigue, requiring individuals to recall previously entered information can indeed result in frustration, exasperation, potentially leading them to either abandon the task altogether or input the same information incorrectly. Who benefits from the application of this success criterion? People with cognitive disabilities who may encounter difficulties with short-term working memory. Those grappling with tasks involving memory creation, information recall, and other cognitive processes. Users contending with mobility impairments, such as those relying on assistive technologies such as switch control or voice input methods. Yet the benefits extend beyond users with disabilities alone. How often do we encounter frustration when forms insist on redundant entry of previously submitted data? With no doubt, this criterion will be beneficial for all users. I will provide a few examples to better clarify the purpose of this success criterion. This slide features a form for the payment step of an e-commerce platform. It prompts user to input billing and payment method details. Despite users already providing shipping information, the system does not permit them to reuse this data for the billing address. This current implementation, of course, does not fulfill the success criterion. In this second example, we encounter a situation which is similar to the previous one as we navigate through the payment step of a checkout process. However, here, a checkbox labeled billing address is the same as shipping address is provided. When this checkbox is selected, there is no need to re-enter the information. This example meets the success criterion. This slide, regarding again the redundant entry success criterion, addresses a quite common exception. In this case, during the account creation process, users are asked to choose a password and confirm it. Confirming the password is essential to ensure accuracy in entering it. Hence, even though the system does not automatically populate or provide an option for users to select previously entered data, it still satisfies the success criterion. Lastly, we have the last success criterion for today, the 338 Accessible Authentication Minimum, which is a AA level criterion. The 338 says, a cognitive function test, such as remembering a password or solving a puzzle, is not required for any step in an authentication process, unless that step provides at least one of the following. Alternative, another authentication method that does not rely on a cognitive function test. Mechanism, a mechanism is available to assist the user in completing the cognitive function test. Object recognition, the cognitive function test is to recognize objects. Personal content, the cognitive function test is to identify non-text content the user provided to the website. The objective of this success criterion is to ensure the availability of an inclusive, user-friendly, and secure login method. Many websites rely, of course, on usernames and passwords for authentication. However, remembering or typing in these details, including one-time verification codes, can pose significant challenges or even insuperable obstacles for individuals with specific cognitive disabilities. Websites can, of course, use the username or email and password inputs for authentication, granted that the author enables user agents, such as browsers, third-party password managers, to automatically fill in these fields. Copying and pasting can offer a reliable method to bypass manual transcription. Users can copy their login credentials from a local search, such as an independent third-party password manager, and then paste this detail into the appropriate field on a login form. Who benefits from this success criterion? Those experiencing cognitive challenges related to memory, reading, numerical comprehension, or individuals with limitation in perception processing. Let's review some examples. On this slide, we find an authentication form featuring username, last name, and password fields that lack proper markup. The website prohibits users from utilizing a password manager and blocks the user from copying and pasting its credentials from a local source. Moreover, it fails to provide any alternative mechanisms aside from this cognitive function test, thereby, of course, falling short of meeting the success criterion. In this second example, we encounter a simple email and password authentication form. Users are allowed to copy and paste data, and password manager tools can automatically populate the inputs. This instance complies with the success criterion. This final example showcases an excellent implementation of accessible authentication. The website presents several methods to access the personal area. Signing in with email and password with options for copying and pasting or utilizing a password manager. Signing in with a passkey enabling face or fingerprint recognition. Alternatively, users can sign in with Google or Apple accounts. By offering multiple alternatives, users can choose their preferred authentication method, therefore improving accessibility. Before moving to the question and answers, for the purpose of this session, we concentrated on discussing the 6 criteria aligned with level A and AA standards, which are particularly relevant for addressing the legal requirements in the United States. Nevertheless, we strongly encourage you at the end of this session to also take the time to examine the 3 remaining AAA criteria, which are focus not obscured enhanced, focus appearance, and accessible authentication enhanced.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much, Giacomo, and Michele for that presentation. We have about 20 minutes left in the hour. If anyone has joined us late, this is Bethany. I work in marketing here at UsableNet. So I think we can start diving into some of the questions that were asked.
Yes, sure. So we can start with the first one, which is how would you summarize WCAG applies to visual graphics such as map and infographics? This is a good question. It really depends on the context. The WCAG incorporates different success criteria related to, let's say, iconography, images, and in general, non-text content. When we talk about non-text content, we can talk about images, videos, maps, infographics, but also, for example, the focus indicator is a non-text element. And again, there are many success criteria related to those aspects. Some of them are related to the alternative text, so providing an alternative, an equal alternative to all users. For example, if the user is blind, he needs an alternative text that provides equal information. So if we have a complex graph, a simple alternative won't suffice. We will probably need a sort of table that mimic the visual presentation of the complex graph, or we may need a longer description that explain what the graph is talking about and all the details contained within the graphic. Then we have worth mentioning that success criterion 2411 covers only cases when the interactive element is entirely obscured at the time of receiving focus and in its initial position. These two factors are important. Yeah, that's true. So the focus obscured minimum, again, requires that the focus indicator is partially visible. The element doesn't need to be entirely visible. And of course, also in its initial position. So if the user scrolls the page, then it is no longer applicable. So yes, this feedback is correct.
I see a good one here. If an organization plans to address accessibility issues, what should they follow? The latest WCAG 2.2 or WCAG 2.1? Can you talk a little bit about the relationship between those?
Yeah, maybe I can start, and Giacomo, you can chime in if there is anything I'm missing. It depends on the regulatory, if any, that you should satisfy. For example, in the US, the Department of Transportation addresses 2.0, for example. So technically, that is the standard that you should guarantee. In general, is always meaningful to apply the most recent standards, in particular, because if you consider the European legislation, while in the law that will be effective June next year, there is specified WCAG 2.1. There is also a mention around any most recent standard as soon as it becomes a recommended standard declared by the World Wide Web Consortium that will apply in place of the one mentioned in the law. So the latest is always the safest option. At the other end, in general, and this is not meant to be a legal advice, but if we consider the legal exposure to risk in the United States, normally the legal industry is mainly using test automation or testing specific success criteria in order to determine which side they should send, which clients, which companies they should send a demand letter or a claim. And from an automated testing point of view, 2.1 and 2.2 are not really different, because the success criteria that can be validated throughout an automated check are still the same. So all the success criteria part of the 2.2, the new one, the additional one, requires a human validation. But yeah, but with that said, the most recent standard is the most recommended to follow.
Thank you, Mick. So moving to the next question, could you discuss the application of 2411? So again, focus not obscured minimum to side drawers. Can they obstruct the element used to activate? I will say it depends. Usually the side drawers available on our mobile website, so basically the hamburger menus, usually those kind of items should temporarily trap the user within the element itself. So they should have as modal dialogues. So if you create a modal dialogue, there is no way to move the focus outside the dialogue. So it will automatically pass the success criterion. If instead you have modals, you have side drawers that overlaps with other content available within the page, then you have to guarantee that when the focus moves outside the drawer, or it is or automatically closed, or there is some way for the user to see where the focus indicator is currently. In reality, 258 is a spacing requirement. If the spacing requirement is met, the target size is no longer relevant. This success criterion will need to be updated, split, modified in WCAG 2.3. Yeah, again, we may still have very small target size with high space between them and meeting the success criterion. So that's true. Anyway, usually the modern browsers use heuristics, especially for touch input devices, to detect which is the closest element. So even if the target element is very small, usually browsers are still able to understand which element has been tapped. The 24 by 24 pixel spacing for interactive icons feature, is this for mobile or for both mobile and desktop? This is a good question. It is for both. So the WCAG are technology agnostic. So the requirement is for both desktop and mobile. Might be worth to mention that different technologies may have different requirements. For example, if we run an automated test on a native application, for example, on iOS, the technology will require a target size of at least 44 by 44 pixels. If we try on Android, the requirement will be 48 dpi by 48 dpi. But the WCG requirement, which is valid for both desktop and mobile, is 24 by 24 pixels. And again, this is the target size minimum. There is a AAA requirement, which is target size enhanced, which requires 44 by 44 pixels. Next question. Success criterion 3 to 6, so consistent health, enforces uniformity across platforms, desktop, web, mobile, native app. This could be problematic for some low-code platform companies. Let's say the requirement specifies unless users change the presentation of the page. So you do not need to be consistent between desktop, mobile, native app. It requires to be consistent within a set of web pages without an interaction of the user. So if the user is changing the viewport, is modifying the zoom, you need to be consistent across that specific setting, not across all the possible settings. Okay, the next question is, will section 508 be looking at implementing WCAG 2.2 AA? I don't have an answer for that. It is a good question. Probably yes. Okay, do you have any insight as to why the target size requirement was reduced? Yes, let's say the initial one was a AAA requirement. So basically, based on the US landscape, the AAA requirement is not a legal requirement. So a new requirement, of course, with a reduced target size was introduced, and after some user testing, was determined that 24 by 24 pixels was enough for a AA requirement. Next question. Hello, and thanks for sharing your knowledge. I have a question regarding 337 redundant entry. During the checkout buying process, the user is required to fill in sensitive data, credit card details, for instance. And I have heard from developers that saving this data is risky. Is there any way to get around this and make credit card info auto-filled? Yeah, let's say again, the requirement is not asking the author to always provide the fully information if the security of the system is at risk. So of course, if you have a credit card number, a CVV code, this information shouldn't be shared again, of course, because it put at risk the security of the credit card of the user. So in this scenario, you are not required to auto-populate those data. Of course, if the user is using a password manager or a technology that automatically populate the input, then it is fine. What is your take on success criterion 257 being costly to meet in low-code platform products where almost all builder and designer components rely on pointer movement on canvas for positioning element building blocks? Do you agree canvas pointer movement should be excluded from 257? Let's say I will start from a higher level. Usually canvas are not very accessible because canvas are basically a sequence of pixels. They are not conveying information to, for example, blind users. So when we talk about canvas, we should always think about a possible alternative, ensuring that all users are able to access information available within the page. About the dragging movements, think about Google Maps. Usually you have arrows to navigate through the map. You don't only need, it doesn't only require your pointer device, the drag and drop functionality to navigate the map, but you can use arrows. In a retail website, you may have, for example, a pinch to zoom functionality available on a mobile device to enlarge the image of a product. In this scenario, an alternative could be provided by simply adding a button to zoom in, zoom out. In the draft requirements, I remember there were very nuanced and detailed rules about color contrast. Do those still exist? Let's say there were a requirement about the focus visibility, but was that mentioned two aspects. One is the size of the focus indicator, and one is about the contrast of the focus indicator. They still exist, but they are a AAA requirement. Focus appearance. Any guidelines that apply specific to native mobile apps in 2.2? Let's say the web content accessibility guidelines are web content accessibility guidelines, so they do not apply one-on-one on mobile applications. As usual, everything within the WCAG 2.2 can be translated into the native mobile world. But yeah, I will say that there is nothing very specific for mobile applications because the WCAG are web content accessibility guidelines. Success criteria for accessible authentication would fail or pass by just allowing copying and pasting a verification code sent by SMS or email. Should there be another verification option? Let's say the idea is that users are able to share for example, the code number, the validation code received via SMS or email by, for example, using the email itself. So you can copy the verification code from the SMS and you can send it to an email, or you can share the verification code via airdrop or whatever it is. So from a WCAG point of view, this suffices. For the WCAG accessible authentication, security challenges as reCAPTCHA fails under this criteria. The answer is no. Let's say it depends. reCAPTCHA provided by Google is a valid method because it enables users to recognize objects, which is an exception. So the Google reCAPTCHA is a viable solution. If you use a custom one, of course, it depends on how it is implemented. Did I understand, Giacomo, that say that the contrast requirements are now AAA requirements? No, I'm not talking about the contrast requirements in general. I was talking about focus appearance. For the contrast requirements, they are still AA requirements. We have different success criteria, such as the 1, 4, 3 about minimum contrast. We have the 1, 4, 11 for non-text contrast. So the contrast requirements, both for text and non-text content, are still required for the AA compliance.
And with that, this webinar is now ended.